going to stop sharing my screen, and I suggest that you all go to speaker view, which is in the top right-hand corner of your Zoom screen, so that you'll be able to see the preacher preaching. And so, Ryan, please share with us your message.
Sorry, I just had like 30 seconds of the most revelatory stuff, but it was all muted, so you guys completely missed out on everything. And I got nothing left, so I might as well call it. No, it's starting to get to know this whole Zoom thing, and it's fun. But gosh, yeah, so duality. Duality is a fun one. It's the fork in the road I've found. Duality is that fork, and our faith is what's kind of what guides us in discerning which direction we want to go. A couple weeks ago, I jumped in with this whole Atheism for Lent series. And the whole idea for this atheistic approach to Lent was to strip away all those kind of preconceptions, dispositions, judgments, routines, all that superficial kind of stuff, past, present, and so forth, that kind of distracts us and hints at the unfulfilling ways of which we can turn at that fork, so that we can approach the fork with an open and empty heart and a new understanding of our purpose and desires, that emptiness, so that we can just strip it away, because that's the only way that we can figure out how we want to fill it. A lot of people have been approaching this whole quarantine thing in a variety of ways, and the easiest one is to start just grabbing at anything. What can I do to fill this void in me, whether it's Netflix or board games or puzzles, or some of those are fulfilling, some of those aren't. So as we dive into this 7-minute little reflection of mine, kind of do that. I want you guys to approach it once again at this emptiness and this atheistic approach for Lent. And in doing so, I'm going to turn towards, once again, I always love jiving in with my Unitarian Universalist friends, because I can close my Bible as opposed to most Sunday mornings in our Presbyterian world, and dive into the true theologians. So today I'm going to turn to the Cheshire Cat, who, from Alice in Wonderland. I just love this quote, and I think it approaches our fork well. One day Alice came to a fork in the road and saw a Cheshire Cat in a tree. "Which road do I take?" she asked. "Where do you want to go?" was his response. "I don't know," Alice answered. Then said the cat, "It doesn't matter." Donna Goddard once said, "The hardest place is at the fork." You can't keep going the same direction as you came, but you have to choose one or the other. Whatever the choice, at least it is movement. Otherwise, you are just forking around getting nowhere. Nobody wants to just fork around getting nowhere. I've found that the people that are really embracing this time of quarantine are those that are finding purpose and hope. We have two different ways of approach: purpose and hope, and boredom and thumb twiddling, forking around, if you may. I personally align with the belief that boredom is simply the lack of attentiveness and appreciation as it is. But yeah, those purpose and hope are two non-dueling traits that I've found have been giving me personally peace and promise in the quarantine and moving forward from it in this experience. Early on, in this whole series, I dove in with one of my favorite atheists, quote unquote, who's also a beautiful precursor to the science world, the metaphysics and physics conundrum, but that's Epicurus. And Epicurus, I'd referenced him a couple times, but from the more scientific approach, this evolutionary approach, Epicurus marks these certain moments in times, and this is couple hundred years BC, long time, much before Darwin, much before all these different influential figures. And he found there's something called a swerve that occurs. Every once in a while in time, something hits the road and it causes us to take a swerve. we have two different ways that we can approach these swerves, kind of like if you're driving a car. You can throw your hands off the wheel, swerve, and hope for the best, or you can grab the wheel and figure out how to make, well, the dualistic approach, how to make lemonade out of the lemons. So yeah, I thought it'd be kind of fun to look at the fork in the road today as just that, the swerve, and approach it in thus by looking at a couple of these dueling elements in our life, our faith, and so forth. The first comes from this idea that it's Palm Sunday. Reverend Russ referenced this whole beautiful holiday, where in the Christian tradition, it's this time of beautiful excitement and anticipation. And we're approaching it from being locked inside on a rainy day staring at our computer screen. But it's just that. Anticipation and excitement can happen within. And that's kind of where early on in this journey, I referenced good old Buddha as a dueling voice, not dueling, a complementary voice to that of Jesus leading into the Lenten holiday. Whereas Jesus went out into the woods wandering, where Buddha pulled back, sat under a tree, and wandered through his soul. And in doing so, I kind of wanted to reference two of the big components of the Palm Sunday holiday, actually. Whereas one of my favorite scripture passages often read on Palm Sunday, and kind of counter it with the Eastern tradition. East and West are not dueling. It turns out their parallel nature is actually much stronger. So both of these reference the world and what happens when we're given these instances of swerving. We're given these forks in the road. And they use different words, but what it comes down to is these forks are instances of possible suffering or possible prosperity. So in John 16:33, it was one of the big Palm Sunday passages in the Christian tradition. It states, "I have said these things to you, that in me you may have peace. For in the world you may have tribulation, but take heart, I have overcome the world." In this world, you're going to have suffering. In this world, you're going to be locked in your prison. In this world, things aren't always going to go the way that you would like. And then coming at it from the Eastern perspective, I just thought it was a really neat juxtaposition. Whereas we look at that same idea of tribulation, that same idea of entanglement in the world, and this opportunity, this swerving chance to set ourselves free from it. So in Buddhism, this is called detachment, but it's connected with a different word. Renunciation is actually the word that's more closely used than detachment in the English tradition. And what that actually means is the determination to be free. Being detached does not mean that we cannot enjoy anything or enjoy being with anyone. Detachment in this time is embracing the beauty of a board game with our friends. It's finding a good video on Netflix. It's any of those things. Those aren't bad things. Rather, it refers to the fact that clinging very strongly to anything or anyone causes us problems. If we have these expectations of what this time is going to look like, where this bug is going to treat us, any number of things, it's going to cause us suffering. So in that, we become dependent on that object or person or thought or just expectation in general. The idea there is, if I lose it or I cannot have it, I'm going to be miserable. Whereas detachment, or this renunciation, says more importantly, and then kind of we'll use a grocery store reference in this time of quarantine, say, if I get the food I like, very nice. If I don't get it, okay, it's not the end of the world. So taking this time as an opportunity to step out of our expectations and lose control a little bit and approach this fork in the road with an open mind, and realize the joys, the lemonades in this dualistic time that we're facing with. And with that, I wanted to kind of close with this. One of the guilty pleasures I have, and I'll just allude to it now, is like everybody else has dove in with the news and whatnot. I've actually been reading all sorts of plague novels and post-apocalyptic stories and so forth. I know I'm kind of a sick-minded approach to the whole thing, but I was reading The Plague by Kamal, and one of the favorite things that I took from that is at one point the priest in the book says to the doctor, "I have the plague. We all have the plague." And what he's referencing there is that from the time of creation, we were all infected with a variety of things, and we choose which of those things we spread. And the priest said right there, like, my main job is to not spread the plague, but to spread the prosperity that I've grown from it. And I thought that, once again, returning to the Buddhist tradition to close, it's just a great way to approach this as we look at this idea of contagion and so forth. Kind of a fun dualistic way to close, looking at contagion. And Buddha says, thousands of candles can be lit from a single candle, and the life of the candle will not be shortened. Happiness never decreases by being shared. And that's also prevalent in the Christian tradition, looking now at the Palm Sunday, where it says, do not hide your light under a basket. Like, spread it with the world. You are the light. Namaste, any number of things. So I hope that we can leave this worship service today figuring out just how to be contagious of the joy, because that's the best way that we're going to have in approaching the contagion of the quarantine and the corona that we can have. So be the light, you guys. Be contagious. Spread it abundantly. And enjoy the excitement and anticipation and so forth that this Palm Sunday holiday is defined by. Thank you all very much, and I will turn it over to the much esteemed Reverend Mink.
Thank you. Thank you, Ryan. The Abrahamic religions of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam are all monotheistic. The name Abrahamic is derived from the patriarch Abraham, who was a major biblical figure from the Old Testament and is recognized by Jews, Christians, and Muslims. In 2005, the estimate was that 54% of the world's population follows an Abrahamic faith. That's 3.6 billion people. Now, within the next 3 weeks, all these faiths will have their holy days. Judaism's Passover starts on April 8th at sundown. Christians are celebrating Palm Sunday because next Sunday is Easter. Muslims are preparing for the month of Ramadan, which starts April 23rd, the month when the Quran was revealed to the Prophet Muhammad. 3.6 billion people are entering their holy days, but it's going to be different this year because of the COVID pandemic. Folks will not be physically worshiping together. So, in addition to all the stresses and fears of shopping for masks, hand sanitizers, staying at home, not being with your children or grandchildren, of the politics, of the confusing news, in addition to all those stresses in your life, over half the world will not experience the annual sacred ritual of their faith as it has been practiced for many, many generations. These annual rituals of holy days have been spiritually rejuvenating and sometimes transformational for believers. But this year, the normalcy has been destroyed. This is a trying time, but also a time of connecting with people we don't usually have time for. These are scary days, but also days of walks, jigsaw puzzles, reading, writing, correspondence. These are upsetting weeks of the political blame and shenanigans, but also weeks of spring, seeing the spring flowers come out like they have never come out before. These are the days of both pluses and minuses. And what an opportunity to think about the concept of duality. Now, as Rev Ryan's mentioned, duality is just the nature in which everything holds opposite truths, opposing truths, all of which are true, at least in the relative sense. Just like there's two sides to a coin, both of which must be present for it to be a coin. Duality has two sides, and denying either one of these sides would invalidate the existence of the other. And now, examples of duality in concepts are good, evil, happiness, sadness, willfulness, denial, yin and yang. Some examples in the duality of human experiences are those coming from different perceptions. As of February of this year, 29% of Americans identify as Democrat, 30% identify as Republican, and 39% identify as independent, and each category holds very different views. All views are true for the person holding them. Another example is winning the lottery. It sounds like a wonderful experience, unless you investigate some of the winners whose relationships and lives were destroyed by the windfall. The core of duality is that there's not one interpretation that will be true for everyone. Now, duality is an essential concept that must be grasped if one is wanting to have a deeper understanding of life. Without recognizing duality, we are missing out on one of the most profound learning tools available. Duality teaches us that every aspect of life is created from a balanced interaction of opposite and competing forces. Yet those forces are not just opposites, they are complementary. They don't cancel each other out, they merely balance each other like dual wings of a bird. This is the Christian tradition, this is the Christian season of Lent, acknowledging the time when Jesus spent 40 days and nights in the wilderness. Jesus was tempted and tried in body and soul by Satan. He was in the wilderness for 40 days and 40 nights, and when he returned, he was transformed. When he came out of the desert, he had a deep understanding of who he was and what he was called to do in the world. Lent is often thought of as a time to give up some habit or activity, but it's really an annual reminder of the insight, wisdom, and transformation that can happen when we are uncomfortable, when we are unsure of ourselves, when we can spend time deeply discerning what our purpose in life truly is. Lent is an annual metaphor for returning to the wilderness. You see, to the ancients, the wilderness was an alien territory where nothing was normal. It was harsh, unforgiving, a dangerous place where certainty was absent. Being in the wilderness meant being away from the safety of community and a loss of all predictable routines, a complete loss of certainty. Yet the wilderness was also a source of great wisdom. The wilderness and adversity are essential elements in the hero's journey. The wilderness is both scary and enlightening, both unsettling and clarifying, both unsafe and sacred, both disturbing and a source of peace. The wilderness is both like two sides of the same coin. COVID-19 is our wilderness. We did not see this coming. We did not enter voluntarily. Our sense of safety is gone. Our emotions are wild and random. Our fear creates hoarding and binge buying and self-centered behavior. There is no predictable end, and we are just at the beginning. We have entered our collective wilderness. But there's another side to this coin. There's a complementary side of being in the wilderness. And if we acknowledge that, it can help us experience the wholeness of this. In our time of no routine, we can discern what's really important to us. This is a good time for winnowing out the useless things in our life. This is an opportunity to refresh the necessary and prune away the unneeded. This is a time to do things you've never had time to do before COVID. This is a time of looking deeper for an understanding of who you are and what you are called to do during this one precious life you have. We are in the wilderness, and this is a both time given to us, both as a blessing and a curse, both scary and sacred, both anxious and sometimes calming, both blinding and enlightening, both. To deny your fear is to bury a thing that will come back to bite you. To deny that this coin has two sides is to deny yourself the great wisdom being offered to all of us. May we acknowledge that we are in the wilderness, and how we come out of it, and we will. How we come out of it will be determined by how well you balance the duality present and see all that the wilderness holds for us all. My prayers are that as you come out of the wilderness, you will be transformed and find and follow your purpose in life. May it be so. Amen, and blessed be.